Bet horse racing on DRF Bets. We'll match your first deposit of $200. Get free expert picks and past performances, plus weekly cash back. All from Daily Racing Form, the most trusted name in horse racing. Dan Illman, Mike Beer, getting ready to kick off a pick 4 on Breeders' Cup Saturday at Keeneland with race number 4. It's the Turf Sprint. We're going 5.5 furlongs. $1 million is the purse. And as we take a look at this field, it's a full field, an overflow field, 15 and 16 on the also eligible list. But the story of the race is Golden Pal, the best turf sprinter in North America and arguably the world.
Yeah, arguably, I guess. Listen, it's hard to knock what he's done on these shores for sure. Obviously, at Keeneland, he did win his prep for this race pretty easily, and they just have him to catch, Dan. I know that I don't think he's going to be able to walk on the lead in here, but I didn't find a ton of pace in this race.
His speed is so dangerous. We saw that last year at Del Mar when he blasted to the front and never gave any horse a chance. And in Timeform US believes we might have a similar situation. We throw up the pace projector. There's Golden Pal on top. His closest pursuer on the projector is Arrest Me Red, who happens to be trained by Wesley Ward, who also conditions Golden Pal. I don't think those two duel, and I don't think Arrest Me Red's fast enough to go with Golden Pal.
Yeah, I don't think he is either. I think he'll try to be up close in this race, but there's no way he makes the lead in here. The other horse who is relatively close on the pace projector, Artemis City Limits, there's no way he's going with Golden Pal in here. It'll be interesting to see if somebody decides to take a shot early in this race and come out of there sending.
You'll note on the pace projector, there are several horses lacking pace data. These are the horses shipping in from overseas, including the number 1 Creative Force, going out for Charlie Appleby, Godolphin, William Buick, a very familiar combination in the winner's circle in Breeders' Cup pasts. And this is an honest horse who was 3rd in the British Champion Sprint last time out. I think he faced a pretty nice horse. We're going to see Kinross a little bit later on Saturday in the mile. Creative Force to me is kind of an Americanized style of running. He's not really a true closer. He breaks okay from the gate, and maybe he can trip out from the rail if he's not out sprinted.
Yeah, exactly. We'll see what kind of trip he can get in here. I think he's going to be able to keep things in range, Dan. I do think he's in actually good form coming into this race. I thought he ran pretty well in the Jubilee at Ascot back in June. He fought his way to a lead late in that race. Then he got nailed by his stablemate, Naval Crown, who was even bigger priced than he was. But I thought he ran well that day. He had really no chance with Kinross last time, but he ran a representative race there. I think this horse is okay. I couldn't really talk myself into him.
Right next door is another European entrant. This is the number 2 Flotus, who figures to be a big price. She is a 3-year-old filly taking on Elders. She was beaten by a 2-year-old that we'll see on Friday, the Platinum Queen in her most recent start, but she didn't break very well that day, and that was a very boggy going. She didn't need to like it. I just wonder if she's good enough. Highfield Princess handled her handily 2 and 3 back.
Yeah, I mean, Highfield Princess brings great form into this race, and Flotus just hasn't been any real match for her. So she has something to find, not only in the face of that horse, but in the face of some of the Americans who are pretty good in their own right.
I was a little bit surprised, Mike, that the number 3 Emirati Anna was not completely outsprinted in last year's Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint. She was able to stay within range. She finished in even 4th. She was no match for Golden Pal. This year, he has yet to win from 6 starts. Is he in the same form as he was in going into last year's Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint? Because it appears he's slowly improving.
Yeah, I think he might actually be in similar form coming in this year, Dan. He ran fine last time. It's just a race that, he was only 2nd best in there, but that was not a poor performance. 2 back against Highfield Princess, another good effort. Highfield Princess is just in great form right now. I think even though he comes into this 0 for 6 as a 6-year-old, I think he comes in similar form that he was in last year.
It is an embarrassment of riches for Wesley Ward. He has Golden Pal. He has Arrest Me Red. He has Campanelle, the number 4, and he has Frankie Dettori to ride Campanelle. A Group 1 winner in France is a 2-year-old sprinting. She comes into this race off of a win over a testing 6.5 furlongs in the ladies sprint at Kentucky Downs. She was ridden by Arad Ortiz this day, and she stayed well off of the rail, away from trouble. She made the lead in the straight, and she's just going to be able to hold on. Now she's got to take on the boys, but I like her cutting back in distance.
I do too. She runs fine in here. It looked like she was going to win a lot easier than it winds up being for her. She really has to dig in late to prevail, but I think that might have something to do with the distance, Dan. Cutting back to 5.5, big bonus for this filly, I think, and she still has more upside.
Up next is a European. It'll be a big price. Go Bears Go is 30-1 on the morning line. I liked this horse last year in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf Sprint, and he got wired by Twilight Gleaming. He didn't show a lot of speed in that race. John Velasquez gave him a great ride, and he was running hard for second. He has shown a lot more speed this year as a 3-year-old. I think the question is he really a grade/Group 1 horse? He won a Group 3 back at the Curragh. He was very game to win it on the lead, first-time cheap pieces. He'll swap out the cheap pieces for blinkers here. In his most recent start, the British Champions, maybe that was a race that exposed him. But I've read several accounts that perhaps the far side of the course wasn't the best. Maybe it was deeper, and he was on the lead on that side.
It certainly could be an excuse for him, and it was also, in against Kinross, who's just a super talented horse. So I think maybe he was just in a little too tough there. But to your other point, Dan, and which I think is maybe the most important one, he's more of a speed type over there. And then when he gets over here, it feels like they just sort of get away from him. And that was the case at in the Breeders' Cup last year. He still ran well, but I prefer him when he can be part of the pace. And I wonder if he's going to be able to do that against this field.
I'm assuming that'll be the plan with the blinkers on. Whether he can do it is a completely different story. Highfield Princess is just a cool mare. She's won her last 3, and she did it in kind of North American style last time out. This is the Flying 5 stakes at the Curragh over soft ground, and you see it's a big field. Highfield Princess was involved throughout, and she really doesn't have any problems dusting off 18 others.
Very confidently handled in this race. You can see the tight pack behind her. She's just waiting for her rider to ask her to go. And then when he finally does, she just runs away from these horses. This is impressive. Her win 1 start prior was also really impressive. Another Group 1 going 5 furlongs. It's sort of amazing the strides that she's made this year as a 5-year-old, Dan. She's clearly the best she's ever been. And this shorter distance she has shown in her last 2 starts is no problem for her.
Let's say she breaks alertly. What's the plan? Are they going to try to take this race to Golden Pal? Does she have the speed to do so, or is she going to have to come from out of it, which is a bit of a foreign style for her?
Yeah, I don't know if she's going to be fast enough to go with Golden Pal. It would seem unlikely that she is if that horse comes blasting out like he did last year. But she's going to be forward in this race. I don't think she's going to be too far away, and I just can't discount her considering the form she's in.
Arrest Me Red cuts back to 5.5 furlongs for the first time since winning the Grade 2 Turf Sprint on Kentucky Derby weekend. He ran second in the Jaipur. It was a Grade 1 race going 3/4 of a mile. On the face of it, it looks really good, especially since it produced 5 next out winners. I was a little disappointed. I thought the trip was there for Arrest Me Red. He sat just off a 14-1 shot, and he just finished second to the late rallying Casa Creed. His last race I thought was okay at Kentucky Downs. I like him cutting back.
I do too. That was the one thing I liked about him as well. I thought his Jaipur was fine. I agree with you that he didn't have any real excuse in there, except that Casa Creed's just a really good horse. And he got a good trip in that race, and he stormed by this horse at the end. He ran well there. I like his races at 5.5, maybe a little better than his races going slightly longer, Dan. I think this is a great distance for him, and I think he can fall into a trip here.
Here's the horse we're all going to be looking at. The number 8, Golden Pal, scoring last time out at Keeneland in the local prep. The Grade 2 Woodford, simply too fast. The defending Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint champion. We see Golden Pal go right to the front, 21-1 for the opening quarter mile, and it was all over but the shouting there. He wins easily. He gave his backers a little bit of a scare 2 starts back in the Troy, but it's not like he broke very well in that race. He got steadied a little bit early. He overcame some things, and if he breaks well, he won't have to overcome anything but just simply being up front.
Yeah, that's true. Am I making too much of that race, though, that we just watched, Dan? I didn't really love the way he finished that race off. I respect that he had his usual speed early, and he did go a pretty quick pace. But he wasn't as dominant there, I didn't think anyway, as he had been in some of his other races. I don't really care about the Troy 2 starts back, even though that wasn't that impressive either, because that just felt like a situation where Irad took the opportunity to rate him because he broke a little bit poorly in there. He still got the job done. I don't know. Is he the horse to beat? Absolutely. I don't love his last 2 races, though.
He is the horse to beat. He's 4 for 4 at Keeneland, but he's going to be a short price. And if you find anything that you don't like about a short price favorite. I think you should at least search for somewhat better value. The 9 is Naval Crown, and Naval Crown's been well beaten in his last 2 starts, one by Kinross in the British Champion Sprint. The other one when he was the favorite in the Haydock Sprint Cup. Emirati Anna finished well ahead of him. I'm just not sure what form he's in, but Charlie Appleby knows a lot more than I do about this, and the fact that he's here is a good sign.
Yeah, I think that's true. And he does have a Group 1 win earlier this year, albeit at a huge price at Ascot. But he did get the job done there over a big field. His races since then just don't do a lot for me, Dan. And I know he's been in, top company over there, but I just haven't seen the race that makes me want to bet him in this field.
It's nice to see the Pennsylvania-bred mare, the number 10 Caravel, back in very good form. She's won 3 of her last 5 starts, 11 of 19 lifetime. She won at Keeneland last time out in the Franklin. This is a race for fellow fillies and mares, and she showed some versatility. She's a horse that in her career can go to the lead. She sat just off. Her tactical speed is a strong weapon, and she wins this race pretty easily as the favorite.
She does. And I do respect that she can sit a little bit and still make a run through this stretch. That's a real positive for her in this race because it feels like she's going to have to sit in here. At the end of the day, Dan, I just wonder if she's really good enough to beat a field of this quality.
Casa Creed is the number 11. Luis Saez, Bill Mott, Grade 1 winner this year at 3/4 of a mile. Grade 1 winner this year at a mile. He's good at a mile. He's very good at 6. The question is he going to be as effective at 5.5? It's very sharp, and he doesn't have a lot of early speed. He's not only going to need some pace, he's not only going to have to handle this distance, but he's going to have to get the right trip.
Yeah, all those things are true. We'll see what kind of price he is, because I feel like if you're going to take him in here, you have to get a halfway decent price on him. That being said, I don't have any doubts that he's as talented as anyone in this race. It's just a question of whether the 5.5 winds up being a little too short. You'll notice in the last 2 years, they didn't run him in the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint because they wanted to avoid the shorter distance, especially last year when it was 5 furlongs. That's way too short for him. So they went in the mile both times. 5.5, it still might be too short, Dan, but this is a really, really good turf sprinter. He's a 2-time Grade 1 winner at 6 furlongs, and they're supposed to go at least a little bit in front of him here. If he catches a pace, he can run this field down.
Bran is up next. And I think we have similar questions about Bran that we do about Casa Creed in terms of distance. He seems very effective at 3/4. He seems very effective going 6.5 furlongs at Santa Anita. Is he going to be as strong going 5.5? He was graded stakes place behind Arrest Me Red at a big price at this distance at Churchill. Let's watch his last start, going 6 furlongs at Kentucky Downs. And with this undulating configuration, the 6 furlongs might play a little bit longer, but he was very game and he is very sharp.
It comes with a good finish in this race. The distance almost certainly helped him in here, but he still runs a pretty good race. More than anything else, Dan, I can't say that I'm a huge fan of this horse, but he's just a little bit underrated. He shows up every single time. He's going to be somewhere off the pace, but I don't think he needs to be that far away. And he's just in really good form right now. I don't love him in here, but I'm not going to be surprised if he's competitive.
Cazadero was a very good 2-year-old for trainer Steve Asmussen back in 2020. He won the Bashford Manor. He was very early. He has been reincarnated as a turf sprinter for trainer Brendan Walsh ever since he was gelded and moved to the turf and has adopted late running tactics. He's done very well, including this one in the Nearctic. Last time out, going 3/4 of a mile at Woodbine. And you see, Patrick Husbands took great pains to keep him covered up until inside the quarter pole. Once he switches to the outside, he gives a very strong kick to run down a nice horse and Bound for Nowhere.
Yeah, good finish in this race. He's going to get the job done. A horse who I don't know that he's necessarily the strongest closer in this race, Dan, but that's certainly been his style since they switched him to turf. He's more of a one-run kind of horse, sprinting on the grass. He was badly compromised 2 starts back at Saratoga in a race with no pace, and he got a little bit of a better setup last time and took advantage.
Let's talk a little bit about Artemis City Limits. What a terrible post position for a bit of an underrated horse. He just missed a Bran in that turf sprint video we saw. And then he ran 3rd in the Woodford behind Golden Pal. And he showed some speed in that race. He dropped into the pocket entering the turn. He wanted to come through on the inside, and that wasn't there. And then he came outside of Golden Pal and finished an okay 3rd. He was very late to change leads. I think he has to show some speed, but from this outside post, isn't he going to have to just work a little bit too hard? And then all of a sudden he confronts Golden Pal.
Yeah, and then run the best race of his life as well, I think. I mean, I just don't really think he's good enough there. And I'll say that while readily admitting he's in the best form of his career right now. I just don't think he's good enough to beat this field, especially from post 14.
Two horses on the also eligible list, Dancing Buck and Oceanic. Oceanic was an okay second in the Woodford behind Golden Powell. Dancing Buck's in very good form. I guess if he gets into this race, he shows some speed.
Yeah, that seems like that they've sort of changed his running style a little bit, and he's been really good in his recent races.
Golden Powell, the horse to beat. Let's see who we're going to take in the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint. You're going with Casa Creed. His accomplishments, his record speaks for itself. He is a true Grade 1 horse. Now he has to show it at 5.5. Do you think the 6-1 on the morning line is fair? Would you take it?
Yeah, the 6-1 is a fair price for me for this horse because I do believe he's good enough to beat this field. I'm not, totally sold on Golden Powell's last two races, Dan. I recognize him as the horse to beat in here, but I don't love those two performances. I wanted to take a shot against him in here. I'm going to try it with Casa Creed and hope he gets a trip.
Really a flyer for me, as I did last year with Go Bears Go. He ran very well. I want to see him show a little bit more speed with blinkers. I think he's a little bit better than how he's looked in his last few races. I'm curious to see how Highfield Princess does, taking on the boys off some very impressive races. Golden Powell's the marquee name. I think he's going to be a short price. He'll be leading them, turning for home. 11,687 for Mike, 5,681 for me. Excellent edition of the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint. We'll see if Golden Powell can go back to back.